Good evening, viewers, and thank you, Samson, for having me this evening. I think, first of all, we need to appreciate that right from the Clinton era, you've not had major policy changes from Washington. Whether you have a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, you haven't had a major shift in terms of approach. What you've had are really minor changes. For example, what we recall during the Trump era, where resources meant for reproductive health programs were reduced because of the Republican stand and their opposition to abortion. So you had some of the resources reduced. But besides those minor changes, you do not necessarily expect a major shift in terms of the way United States relates with Africa and Uganda in particular. The good example I can give is a couple of months back we had an interview between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson, a prominent United States journalist. And in that interview, Vladimir Putin revealed that he learned one important thing in 1999. 1999, Putin had just become president of Russia, and Bill Clinton was ending. So they had a meeting in Moscow. And during the day, Putin asked Clinton whether Russia would be allowed to join NATO if it made the request. And Clinton said yes. Later on during dinner, Clinton came back to the very same question and told Putin that, yes, I remember during the day you are wondering whether you can be allowed to join NATO. But after making some consultations, I've come to the conclusion that that's impossible. So Putin said that in 1999, he confirmed that US presidents do not have the power to make unilateral decisions. So we've got to bear that in mind as we think about Donald John Trump. In fact, that's the excitement people had when Barack Obama was elected president in 2008. They thought that because Obama was a black and his dad came from Kenya, then Africa was going to benefit immensely from the Obama presidency. What happened is that in the first 4 years of Barack Obama, he visited Africa once, and he went to two countries, Ghana and Egypt. And when you analyze that journey, it was meant to serve the American interests, not the interests of Africans. So I see a continuation of many of the American policies under Joe Biden. I see a continuation of those policies under Donald John Trump, many of those policies. In fact, if you followed the election closely, you know that the US, you know that Africa, the African agenda, was not a priority issue on the Democratic side, and it was not a priority issue on the Republican side. In fact, when you read the so-called Project 2025, which is a shadow of the Republican Party's manifesto, which Trump is going to follow during this term, Africa, the way the Republicans who drafted this agenda view Africa as a deposit for resources for them to exploit, not necessarily as a continent to engage with on an equal basis, but as a deposit for their resources. And that's the continuation I expect, because you know that just last year, the United States agreed or committed to provide resources for the rehabilitation of the Lobito project, and it includes rehabilitation of roads, rail lines, and bridges connecting 3 countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Angola. But when you look at the entire project and its objectives and the aims, you realize that these people are looking for resources. And for me, I see a continuation of majority of the policies that we've seen during the Biden presidency. No major shift for me.
Let me ask very briefly. The Democrats branded this as an election about democracy, saying democracy is on the ballot. You're talking of a convicted felon, a man who led an attack on the U.S. Capitol, and the populace in the U.S. has just given him a mandate. What does that mean for democracy globally?
For the Democrats to talk about democracy and human rights, it's in many cases pure rhetoric. And I will still take you back to Barack Hussein Obama. He talked about these lofty ideas in his campaign. In fact, in one of his campaigns in 2007, he even introduced a Ugandan activist who was his supporter during the 2008 election, if you remember very well. And he said that this young person you see, he comes from a country which is challenged democratically. But you know what? When Obama became president, the 2 countries he visited, besides Ghana, he went to Egypt. And in Egypt, he was hobnobbing with the late Hosni Mubarak, one of the worst dictators on the African continent at the time. He had governed Egypt for more than 30 years under the state of emergency. He governed without a deputy. In fact, he appointed a deputy when people started demonstrating at the Tahrir Square. So most of these things are pure rhetoric, and you can't use rhetoric to establish what a country is really interested in terms of its relationship with other countries. If you look at what it actually does, the implementation is the most important thing, not necessarily what they say. What they do is what matters most in diplomacy and international relations.
Thank you.